In front of the entrance to Eastern Illinois' Lance Arena sits one solitary statue of a women's basketball player taking a jump shot. On the base is inscribed the words, "A tribute to the women of Eastern, past, present, and future." The statue is in the likeness of perhaps the greatest female athlete ever to play at Eastern Illinois, but is meant to represent the success of all of EIU's former, current, and future female athletes.
I don't want anyone to think that's a statue in honor of me. It's a statue in honor of the women's athletics. But to be singled out as the kind of the representative, I guess, if you will, by the Williams, I mean, you know, if you don't do anything in life, if I've never done anything more in my life, it's like, wow, look how these people respected me, and the school respected me, and I better gosh darn make sure I continue to represent myself well and to represent Eastern well. And
representing Eastern is not always an opportunity that female students had, and to understand a tribute, you must indeed look to the past, present, and future of women's athletics, as this academic year marks the 40th anniversary of Title IX legislation. Women have engaged in physical activities since the early days when Eastern Illinois first opened its doors. Alice C. Christensen was an early educator on campus and a teacher of gymnastics for girls on the 3rd floor of Old Main in the western section of the building. It was in this class that classes in physical culture engaged in simple movements without apparatus, as described in a letter written by Livingston C. Lord. Primitive opportunities in physical education were all that were offered to the earliest female students at Eastern Illinois University until Florence Mcafee was hired as the school's first administrator for women's physical education in 1924. It was under Mcafee's direction that the Women's Athletic Association was formed, an extension of what many high schools of the era had in the Girls Athletic Association. Essentially a somewhat organized way for females to have competition. But the terms sports or athletics was not widely used.
When I went to Eastern, it was just natural to join WAA. And Dorothy Hart, who retired from here as dean, was teaching PE at that time, women's PE. She once told my sister and me that we were some of the plainest girls she'd ever seen, so we just liked to play games. And being tall, I particularly liked volleyball because back then we could play non-rotation, and I got to play the middle of the front row all the time, which was fun. But we did play other teams, other schools, mostly in Illinois, mostly the state schools.
Physical activity was an integral part of the college experience, and as the sole women's instructor in physical education for many years, Florence Mcafee became a staple not only in the classroom and community, but also in the lives of many of the young women who walked to the Charleston campus. Former physical education major Diane Barr remembered the examples Mcafee taught her even to this day. In a letter, she recounted, "I remember my first day on campus, and I came bounding into class in a loud voice and said, 'Hi, Dr. Mcafee.' She looked sternly back at me and said, 'I may be Dr. Mcafee, but I am Miss to you.' Over the next 5 years, I came to know and deeply respect this woman called Miss Mcafee. She was always there to lend a helping hand." Following the retirement of Mcafee from EIU in 1963, physical education classes continued on campus, providing opportunities for women in a variety of sports. It was not until the summer of 1972 that landmark changes occurred with the passage of the education amendments that included Title IX as one segment. When President Richard Nixon signed the bill into law on June 23, 1972, he merely mentioned the sections concerning the desegregation of busing for public schools and did not even mention the expansion of educational access for women contained in the law. Title IX stated in part that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. While the Title IX legislation may have been skimmed over by the President of the United States, at high schools and colleges across the nation, the impact was life-changing. Now women could have the same opportunities as their male counterparts, even if not on an equal playing field.
It was a big thing for me. And in high school, I mean, I loved competing. I'd go out and play with the boys whenever I could in the backyard. When I came to college, I was in the elevator in my dorm, and I saw a sign to go out for the field hockey team. And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, because that's what I dreamed of, being on a team.
As women started to take advantage of increased athletic and academic opportunities, the Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women became the governing body for women's athletics and helped in the national promotion of women's sports. However, on many college campuses, Eastern included, many of the athletes lived in anonymity.
Remember it, I don't think anybody hardly even knew we existed. So we weren't treated differently because nobody even knew that we were on a team. They would always have a Panther of the Week, and of course it was always a male. And I think Susie Weber and I were the first females, maybe our junior year. She was, excuse me, the wing in front of me on the field hockey team. I looked back in my yearbook before I came today, and my freshman year, girls' athletics weren't even mentioned. And my sophomore year, I found one page, and as to 40 pages for the men. So people just really, we weren't treated differently. They didn't know we were.
Gaining some state, regional, and national recognition would come in the following years as EIU would find success at the AIAW level in several sports. Helen Riley was the coach on many of the early EIU women's teams, but most notably, she was one of the nation's leaders in field hockey. During the course of the AIAW era, Eastern would make a national tournament appearance in basketball, field hockey, softball, track, and volleyball, with its highest finish coming with a third-place showing at the AIAW Softball World Series in 1982.
For me and for the many women student athletes at Eastern, the late 70s was a time of excitement and challenge because the experience of intercollegiate athletics was still so very new and something that we really didn't at all take for granted. We shared experiences of what I thought were truly great coaches and teachers. We had access to the facilities, and we took a lot of pride in really learning to be student athletes and pushing ourselves to be the best we could be and learn how to be a team. There were also the moments that we all remember of being squeezed a little bit into the vans on road trips, being maybe a little bit short on per diem for meals, and having to share uniforms or warm-ups with other teams. But there's not a part of the experience that I would trade or regret. And most of all, I appreciate all of my teammates and, again, the coaches and administrators who were so great with us.
As teams across the nation were having success at the AIAW level, scholarships were still inequitable between men's and women's teams on college campuses. The success of women's athletics on a national scene, from the Olympics and to individual sports like golf and tennis, was growing rapidly, but to earn a scholarship on a college campus didn't transcend as easily.
In 1972, there were no girls playing in high school, or very few. A few would kind of try to play on a boys' basketball team or something, but there weren't any. And so who are you going to recruit and who are you going to give money to? Then there was a board. As I recall, it was WAA, Women's Athletic Association, excuse me. And that board was made up of some faculty, some coaches, a representative from most of the teams, that kind of thing. And that board then decided who played, what kind of schedule each team got, and maybe even who got I'm not sure, it was probably more a board of coaches that decided who got the aid. And there were two types given out at that time. They weren't given supposedly because of athletic excellence or anything like that. It was more, it was a TSA, which was Talented Student Award. They went to musical people as well, or other talented students. And then there was another one that was a grant and aid. And I think there were only 2 grant and aids, and there might have been a TSA one per sport, but I doubt there were that many. And coaches decided, and they went to people that could be competitive and contribute in more than one sport.
By the early 1980s, the AIAW was coming to an end as schools moved their women's programs into the NCAA to join their male counterparts. That move occurred at EIU in the fall of 1983 as the Panthers athletic programs joined the Gateway Athletic Conference, a league comprised of teams in the Midwest with women's athletics teams. As that move occurred, some programs at Eastern Illinois did not move along with them, as sports like field hockey and badminton were no longer offered as competitive intercollegiate sports. This move also occurred as EIU was making a transition with its men's programs from NCAA Division II to NCAA Division I status, playing as a member of the Mid-Continent Conference.
Having the opportunity to play postseason, yeah, that was special. Even at that point in time and historically in the changeover of things, you could still sense that urgency. It was one and done. Joe and Glenn Williams were instrumental in that process, and I think moving that quicker for the whole EIU, not just the basketball, but all of the women's sports. They took a special interest in softball and basketball, but they were very involved with it all, and I think their interest pushed that along quicker. By our senior year, were using a bus to travel for basketball. There was a new softball field in development. There was a lot more sports information, the nice PR that was sent out, the brochures, the booklets, so from that aspect, there was a lot more of that kind of exposure, getting it out. On the court day to day and on the field day to day, I didn't really notice much different.
And so I started coaching in the fall of 1983. So we had just gone to Division I. We had just gone to the Gateway Conference. And so it was really part of that whole transition. I would say my first year of coaching, it was nothing but trying to put some organizational structure in place. There were no uniforms. And so the first thing I did was ask all of the team to purchase a particular polo and tennis skirts so that we could at least look like we were on a team together. My second year, my goal was to get a uniform so that we all looked like we belonged to Eastern Illinois University in a uniform way. And my third year was to get us warm-ups. And so those were the challenges, just some really basic things in the first few years. The tennis players all provided their own equipment, their own rackets, their own stringing, and the only thing that I provided equipment-wise was the tennis balls.
In the early 80s, there were a lot more females coaching sports because the money wasn't there for the coaches. None of us were in it for the money. Men didn't get involved in women's athletics until the NCAA took over, and all of a sudden, more money was provided, and as soon as money became an issue, now the male coaches came into the scene. I, never really felt that was I didn't feel like it was a threat to me, but, that is what propagated all the men coming into women's athletics.
Fortunately, I had an opportunity to compete during the AIAW era and also the NC2A era, so I experienced what it was like not to have quite so much support. And then when the NC2A took over and became the governing body for women's athletics, things began to change. While the change happened slowly, it was very noticeable to the student athletes that were in the program. So for me, I got the best of both worlds. So I was very, very fortunate and thrilled to have the opportunity to compete at the Division I level.
Eastern Illinois' transition into the Gateway Athletic Conference provided it with regional competition against many of the same schools the Panthers had battled with during their days as an AIAW member. A women's sports-only league, the conference offered championship competition in 10 sports with members including Bradley, Drake, Illinois State, Indiana State, Southern Illinois, Southwest Missouri State, Northern Iowa, Western Illinois, and Wichita State. The conference ceased operations in the early 1990s, with EIU competing for a short time in the Mid-Continent Conference before following the men's programs into the Ohio Valley Conference in 1996. As the conference affiliation has evolved, so too has women's athletics at Eastern and the NCAA level.
At Eastern, when I got there in '83, we had 6 full scholarships for volleyball, which could be divided. Volleyball was allowed 12. I was told I'd get 1 each year, my first 6 years, and we'd be up to 12 after 6 years. 12 years later, we finally got the full scholarships, and most of it was videotapes. A kid would come out. I only had in-state scholarships. That was the one thing. All the volleyball scholarships were only for Illinois kids. Now, the good thing was Illinois had a lot of great volleyball players, so I was able to go out and find a lot of recruits.
When I came back as faculty athletics rep, it was really kind of interesting to me because in some of the second-tier sports they were trying to get going, the women's team's budget were actually higher than the men's teams because they were trying to catch up and equalize things. And so the women really were working on getting equipment and uniforms and travel budgets and scholarships. And so it looked like inequity at times, but actually I think it was trying to get caught up so that it was an equal kind of experience for the women who were attending Eastern on some of those teams. Over my time period as a faculty athletics rep, I really thought that budgets and opportunities equalized. By the time I resigned a couple years ago, I really felt like the women had great opportunities here and they were very comparable to what the men were getting.
I believe that the single most important indicator is that young girls and their parents think that sports have always been there for them. They love to play them, the parents support it, and all of the little girls want to play, and they don't realize that there was ever a time without it.
Eastern Illinois has continued its success from the AIAW level to the NCAA level. The Panthers have experienced NCAA championship play as both teams and individuals, with EIU basketball, soccer, and volleyball all making postseason play along with individual athletes from track.
Being an athlete, I started in 8th grade to play basketball, and then that was just like my world, all the way up until I realized I was halfway decent at track. And then I, like playing basketball all the way through, it taught me so much discipline. It taught me how to just, depend on a team, like, teamwork skills and all that. And I really enjoyed basketball and track through high school. And then when I came to college, it was just like a totally different world, and I loved every minute of it. I got to go to different states that I'd never been before. I got to compete against like really good, like world-class athletes, and see all that too. It was an amazing feeling, and it gave me an education like that I never thought that I would get. Honestly, in high school, I didn't think that I would go to college, and then when I was brought this opportunity, I was like, I might as well jump at it, and it was like the best decision I ever made.
My experience here at Eastern has been nothing but great. I mean, great people, great program, great women, great school, great education. So, I mean, you come to college and you learn about life, you have different opportunities, and it's all about how you grasp those opportunities and, what you do with them. And I plan on going to school to become a physician's assistant, and this scholarship has made that possible.
As the next generation of Panther athletes prepares to embark and shape the future, Eastern Illinois has recently paid tribute to its history. In 2008, EIU honored its pioneers of women's athletics, with all former female athletes prior to the mid-1980s invited back to campus to be awarded a varsity EIU letter. This year, on the 40th anniversary of Title IX, Eastern Illinois pays tribute to the women of Eastern, past, present, and future.
I've now been involved in college athletics for over 30 years, and women's athletics have grown, changed, and developed for all of that time, and it has been just, again, truly amazing. One of the experiences and opportunities that a lot of the women at Eastern, who were student athletes at that time, received in 2007 was Eastern contacted us, and the women in the 70s and probably sometime into the 80s did not receive letter awards for their participation in Eastern's athletic programs. So it was really an extremely meaningful opportunity for me to go back to Eastern, to share with all of these women, and to receive my letter award. And so I think that was just very much of a personal time that I really felt like we had made strides, and that we were also reaching back to the women who had been part of those early experiences, but maybe didn't get some of the recognition that we would have liked at that time.
You hear all the time how blessed young people are in this generation, and how people back then didn't have the same opportunities as we do now. Just not even scholarship, but just the respect and being allowed to have a try at a scholarship, or you know, working just as hard as a man and not being able to get your school paid for or something like that. So, you know, you hear it all the time, and it doesn't get old. You appreciate it, and you go with it. So
I get a chance to meet them, I'll thank them honestly for like paving the way for us to actually get a scholarship, because I mean having a scholarship made me work that much harder, but that took true dedication for them to work that hard, and they weren't even, you know, paid for it.
I think early on, no one went to see women play basketball, whereas, of course, the men's games were very popular. And I think some women's sports perhaps have grown more than others. Well, certainly in the Olympics, women's volleyball has been one of the major things. And basketball, I think, on a professional level is certainly coming along.
Because of Title IX, I believe I have an opportunity to be here at Eastern as the athletic director and to be the first female athletic director at Eastern, and I certainly hope not the last, but to be the first has been a humbling experience for me, and I do feel that I have a responsibility to lead this program in the appropriate way, do things the right way, lead with character and integrity, that young people understand it's not about whether you're male or female. It's about doing a job and doing a job well.
Just the camaraderie among all the athletes, just the opportunity. And again, I get choked up talking about it because growing up, being told you can't do something, the thing that you really love to do, you know, it's just. When I got here and I could got a uniform, ooh, and it was fun. And I've enjoyed being a part of athletics, and even since as a coach. Yeah, it's probably just the opportunity that finally was there for me.